Good morning, everyone. Good morning. You know how we do when you come into the room, say hello. Leave a comment if you're catching this by the replay, hashtag replay. And welcome to this morning's installment of Contractors Chatter. I am your host. Excuse me. Whew. Sorry, everybody. Had to fix something. Anyway, I am your host, Luciana Turner, and I'm bring. Anyway, contractors chatter is a little bit of business legislation, a touch of not necessarily inspiration, but insight into what's going on in the world of business and some things that you need to keep an eye on when it comes to running your business. So let's get this started. I am currently taking a class. Yes, I take classes. I do not just preach continual education, I continue to educate myself. And while you should not run from class to class, training to training, a good amount of continuing education is important. As my mentor says, you need to learn until you go. You have to grow until you go. And people who have the thought process that you should not continue to learn or you shouldn't continue to grow are people, in my opinion, that limit their potential. There isn't any such thing as I don't have anything to learn. And one of the key takeaways I took from that training was there are seasons of ebbs and flows. This particular training is a speaker training that I'm taking. However, a lot of what he taught in that speaker training applies across the board. And there are ebbs and flows to everything in business, but it's how you handle the ebbs and flows. It's how you handle those ebbs and flows. So, what I want to ask you, or what I want to impart in your spirit or psyche, however you wish to use it, is do you have a plan for when it ebbs in your business besides panic? Do you have a plan for when it ebbs? Now, I refer to the COVID time as the great pivot because businesses who were able to pivot were the ones who survived. You know, there was this whole thing brick and mortar is dead, all the brick and mortar businesses went away. I saw restaurants pivot and survive. And no matter what anybody says, brick and mortar businesses will not totally go away. That is a myth. That's a myth. Brick and mortar will be here forever. Everything will just take on a different form. So I say again, do you have a contingency for when there are ebbs in your business? Everybody has a plan for when it's flowing, but do you have a plan for when it's ebbing? And what I mean by ebbing is when things get a little slow. when things and I don't mean holding an emergency meeting. I mean, do you have a plan already in place for such occasions? While I do not ascribe to this whole thought process of the world is coming to an end, I also do not exist in a vacuum and do see the signs of an economic turning. Are you prepared for the turn in the economy? And somebody's going to ask themselves, is she saying I need to have three different strategies? No, I'm saying you need to have a thorough, all encompassing strategy. We see what's coming down the pike. The economic factors are there. So, why is your strategic plan not factoring those things in? That's what I'm asking. Have you factored in everything? And before you get to hacking at your cost and hacking in your plan is we're just going to lay people off, do we have to be so drastic? Because, quite to my surprise, I took a class years ago, and there's this man, I wish I could remember his name. He he was paid good money to come in and turn around failing companies. He actually came in to turn around a company that my mother was working at. She worked for a large grocery store chain that's popular in the northeastern seaboard. And I remember him saying in the class that everybody wants to lay off because that is the first thing they do. They want to cut the frontline workers because they think that is the first thing they should do. And he was saying when he comes in, the first thing he does is look at the C suite. He looks at operations. And to me, that made sense because a lot of times there are redundancies. People can get switched around in the upper echelons or in the recs. You're hiring for positions when if you just switch things around, it makes sense. The phrase, the picture can't see its own frame. A lot of times you don't need to hire, you just need to reframe your focus. And that goes for big business, small business, individuals, solopreneurs. You just need to reframe your focus. Good morning. A friend of mine was getting ready to retire, and she thought her retirement was just going to be lounging at home reading books. But the closer she got to retirement, the more she realized that isn't what she wanted. Then this is before I started my business. Otherwise, I would have charged her for this great advice I gave her and help her set up her business. But what retirement looked like for her turned out to be something totally different. She ended up doing something not full time, but part time because she would have been bored out of her skull sitting at home. She had to reframe her perspective. That's all. Same in business. You have to reframe the perspective. So, as we go into these changing economic times in businesses, it's actually a good time to reframe the perspective and to expand if you're strategic and you're smart, not wild and fast, but strategic and incremental. Remember, the greatest redistribution of wealth occurred during the Great Depression. History teaches us a lot of lessons, and we often focus on the tragedy, that there was a lot of tragedies during the Depression. However, from a business perspective, the greatest redistribution of wealth came out of the Great Depression. Think about that when you want to fall into the gloom and doom. You need to reposition. Everybody talked about how the world was going to come to an end during the, as I call it, the great reset of COVID. But those who were able to reposition and pivot came through unscathed. It was those who just stayed locked in a position and refused to analyze, recognize, and shift. They were the ones that had a hard time. You get where you're going head first, as my mentor always says. Now, there are 3 hearings I wanted to bring to your forefront today. The EPA budget. Now, FY 2024 budgets are starting to go before House and Senate, and they've been going before House and Senate for a little while. It's been overshadowed by the whole funding the government debacle. As anybody who's been paying attention to the news know, California just defaulted on their loan obligation. One of their loan obligations, and more than likely they're going to be looking to the federal government to bail them out. And more than likely, our president is going to go before Congress for a package to bail out California, because California just increased business taxes on all businesses operating in California. Now, I remember when I was going to bid on a contract in California, I was given the advice to actually not set up a business in California, but rather in a border state. And this was years and years ago, because California business taxes were just too high. And when I was in corporate, my corporate company was pulling offices out of California into border states. We just couldn't, there was a couple of contracts that required us to have a physical presence there. They just minimized the presence, good morning, as much as possible. So with the default, California's going in, and the increase of business taxes across the board. I mean, when I say across the board, every business received a business tax increase. I don't know what's going to happen there. I just saw that. Hey, Sean, how you doing? So I don't know what's going to happen with California. This is not a political platform. However, I don't know what Californians were thinking when they voted this character back in, because he wasn't fiscally responsible. I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum. He wasn't fiscally responsible. He was spending more than it was taking in. And that's something that we all need to be mindful of in business, period. You can't spend more than you have. and then say you can't afford. We have to reset a lot of things. And that's one of the things we're talking about at the Contractors Intensive is understanding our numbers so that when we go after contracts and we go after business, we understand our current numbers and how the new fit business affects our numbers. Because sometimes in pursuing contracts, you shouldn't pursue a contract because the net effect of that new business is negative. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. I'm not going to go there. However, with that said, budget talks are going through the House and the Senate as we speak. They're going to pass extended spending, but the president is talking about ways to bail out California and their mess that's going on. So, but something every small business needs to know about. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, congressional hearings are being held on changes to the SBA 7A loan program. So SBA is changing their whole suite of services towards small businesses. Their loan programs are getting an overhaul. Their 8A program is getting an overhaul. Their 8A program is currently up for public comment. Please go to the Federal Register. Please go to the SBA's website, read what the current changes are. There's one change I currently do not like. Put down your questions, your concern, so that it's on the record and can be addressed. It doesn't pay to wait until it's too late and then want to complain about it. Go to the Federal Register and voice your concerns. Contact your congressperson and voice your questions about these changes if you have any, your concerns if you have any, or quite frankly, don't say anything if these changes are if these changes are going to adversely affect you. It's just call it what it is. Oftentimes we're not paying attention, and then when changes come down the pike that harm us, we want to sit in a corner and moan and complain when you just weren't paying attention to what was going on. It's just as simple as that. And it's nobody's fault that you wasn't paying attention but your own. I know a lot of people are like, you go live too early in the morning. Well, catch the replay. Even though my videos come down off of my Facebook page after a while, which I'm getting ready to start culling my videos off of there, they're still up on my YouTube channel. You have a responsibility to your business to stay informed of those things which affect your business. I'm not saying you're supposed to know all things. I'm saying you're supposed to know those things which ultimately affect your business and affect the way you make decisions. That is what I'm saying. So those hearings are tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you're in the DC area, I think those hearings are open. And you know what? I didn't pay attention. I didn't pay attention to see if it was open to the public, but they typically are. So if you're in the DC area and you have time, pop in and you get to see our government at work. And you may actually get to meet with some people. I would say every government contractor should make a trek to Washington anyway to meet with the small business office. There's a small business officer or the small business committee on House and Senate. Make an appointment to meet with somebody in that office anyway. Period. Just not from a lobbying point of view, because contractors have to be careful of that and you have to report that. Just from the perspective of introducing yourself, asking questions, knowing what's going on, being in the room, being in spaces, so you get a greater understanding of the entire process. I am a big proponent, and some people say I do too much, and that's okay, but I'm a proponent of understanding the process. I feel people don't do enough. And then they stumble in the dark and they accidentally get wins, and then they want to think they're experts. And as my trainer said last night, people aren't as good as they could be because they think they're better than they are. So, with that said, Thursday and Friday, they're talking about, they're going to, on the House, they're going over the defense authorization budget for FY 2024. And in the Senate, they're going to start reviewing the defense budget. So we're looking at the FY 2024 budget. I'm sorry, I got distracted by a notice. We're looking at the FY 2024 budgets coming down the pike. Forecasts for every agency for FY 2024 is out. Read them thoroughly. Use them in your strategic planning. Chatter, as I told you, in June, will only be streaming from my Facebook channel and LinkedIn. The broadcast from Facebook will cease, and Instagram. So if you want to continue watching, I'm only going to be broadcasting from YouTube and my LinkedIn. So with that, I'm going to close out by inviting you to return tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. for another installment of Contractors Chatter. There's a lot of things going on in the Federal Registry, including some executive orders that hit the registry today. I didn't get a chance to read them, which is why I didn't bring them before you this morning. But don't forget to register for the Contractors Intensive. But as I've always told you, a stressed mind can't create. So take some time today to pull back and think, what can I do to be better for myself, for my family, for my business? And with that, I will see you tomorrow morning. Have an amazing, amazing day. I'm Luciana Turner, your host